They said he was cold and unable to love. On their wedding night, he proved them wrong. The winter lights spilling through the tall windows made the entire room look colder than it really was. The mansion's sitting room was all polished marble, muted blue walls, and gold trim that whispered old money with every reflection. Marissa Hale stood near the doorway, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. Her worn coat and scuffed boots did not belong in a place like this, and she knew it. She was already rehearsing her apology, already searching for a graceful way to walk out. But then he entered. Adrian Cole, 34, sharp suit, darker eyes, and a presence that filled the room before he even spoke. His reputation echoed louder than footsteps in the corporate world, brilliant, unreadable, and colder than a January morning in New York. People said he did not feel anything. People said he could not love. People said a lot of things. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough for her to see the faint shadows under his eyes, far enough to remind her that this was not a social call. "Miss Hale," he said, voice steady, low, controlled. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Marissa tried to swallow the tightness in her throat. "You said it was urgent. I thought maybe it was about the work I applied for." His expression did not change. "It is not." Her stomach sank. Of course it was not. People like him did not call people like her for ordinary things. He gestured toward the sofa. "Please, sit." She sat stiffly, afraid to touch anything. Adrian remained standing for a moment, watching her the way someone studies an artwork they have not decided whether to purchase. Then he moved to the opposite chair, folded his hands, and went straight to the point. "I will not waste your time," he said. "I need a wife." Immediately, the words hit her like a dropped tray in a quiet cafe. Loud. Out of place. Impossible. She blinked, convinced she had misheard. "I am sorry, what?" "A marriage," he repeated. "Legally binding. 12 months. In return, I will clear your family's medical debt in full and secure long-term care for your brother." The room seemed to narrow around her. He should not have known about her brother. He should not have known about the hospital bills piling like unpaid winter rent. Yet he did. Marissa shook her head. "This is insane. You do not even know me." Adrian leaned forward slightly. His voice stayed calm, but there was something behind his eyes. Not warmth. Not threat. Something like determination wrapped in old hurt. "That is exactly why you are the right choice," he said. "You do not come from my world. You owe nothing to it. You cannot be bought by it. And you have something I need even more than a legal spouse." She exhaled shakily. "What could I possibly have that you need?" "Integrity." The word hung between them, soft but heavy. Marissa looked away, eyes stinging. Integrity had not been paying the hospital bills. Integrity had not kept her last job when the company collapsed. Integrity had not stopped the landlord from taping an eviction notice to her door at 6 in the morning. She rose from the sofa. "I cannot do this. I do not want anything from you." Adrian stood too, but not to block her. His voice lowered, gentler than she expected. "This is not about wanting. It is about surviving. You need help. I need a partner on paper. There is no affection required. No expectations outside the contract." Marissa paused at the doorway. The mansion behind her felt like a world made of distance and secrets. The world outside felt like cold wind, unpaid bills, and fear. "Why tonight?" she whispered. "Because the board meets tomorrow," Adrian said quietly. "And if I show up without a wife, the company my mother built will fall into the hands of people who destroyed her." There it was, a fracture in his armor. Small but real. Marissa turned back. Adrian's gaze did not flinch. Neither did his offer. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she answered. "Tell me the terms." And with that single sentence, the door between two lives, one broken, one frozen, swung open. The night felt heavier once Marissa stepped back out into the cold air. The marble floors and gold trim of the mansion were behind her, but the weight of Adrian Cole's proposition followed her down the stone steps like a shadow she could not outrun. The streetlights cast long streaks across the driveway, and the winter wind stung her cheeks as if urging her to keep walking, too. Forget everything that had just happened inside. But the world outside was not kinder. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the hospital. Another reminder that the payment for her brother's treatment was overdue. Another warning that they could not hold his place on the operating schedule much longer. She leaned against a stone pillar, trying to steady her breath, but the panic pressed harder with every passing second. Marissa's entire life had been unraveling for months. First came the layoffs at her old company. Then came the stack of medical bills after her brother's accident. Then the eviction notice taped to her door in bright red ink. She was doing everything she could. Extra shifts at the diner, selling her furniture piece by piece, picking up freelance work whenever it came. It still was not enough. She closed her eyes and let her forehead rest against the cold stone. For a moment she allowed herself to fall apart, quietly, where no one could see. Inside the mansion, Adrian watched her through the tall window. Most people in her situation would have said yes on the spot. Most would have grabbed the offer without thinking twice. But she had walked away, even knowing how desperate her circumstances were. There was a steadiness in her refusal, a stubborn dignity he had not expected. It only confirmed what he had already decided. She was the right choice. When she finally walked back toward the iron gates, she saw him standing outside, hands in his coat pockets, breath clouding in the cold air. He had followed her out, but he did not look impatient or frustrated. He looked certain. "Miss Hale," he said, voice low. "Before you go, let me explain why I chose you." She stopped several feet away, keeping distance as if the space between them could protect her from the impossible choices closing in around her. "You think I am someone who can be bought," she said quietly. "Someone who would agree to something like this because you have money and I do not." Adrian shook his head. "If I thought that, I would never have asked you." She did not respond, but she did not walk away either. He continued, "I know about your situation because I ran a standard background check. I also know you refused charity from your former employer. I know you returned to check someone. Tried to slip into your hand at the hospital lobby. And I know you have been carrying this alone." Marissa's throat tightened. He should not have known any of that. Those were moments she had tried to forget, not moments meant to follow her into the night. "You have every reason to take advantage of my offer," he said. "But you will not. That is what makes you the right person for this arrangement." She hugged her coat tighter, more for courage than warmth. "You talk about this as if it is a business deal." "It is," he replied. "And business deals require trust." She almost laughed, but her voice broke instead. "Trust? You investigate strangers. You measure everything like a contract. How can you talk about trust when you do not let anyone get close?" Adrian did not flinch. The cold wind moved through his hair, but his expression stayed steady, almost painfully honest. "Getting close is the very thing that destroyed everything I had 5 years ago," he said. "I am not asking for intimacy or affection. I am asking for partnership on paper. In return, I will carry the burden you have been carrying by yourself." For a long moment, the night went silent. Only the distant hum of traffic and the soft rustle of bare branches filled the space between them. Marissa finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "My brother could die if he does not get surgery soon." "I know," Adrian said. "And if you agree, he will have every doctor, every specialist, and every resource he needs." Her breath shook as she exhaled. The decision was tightening around her like a closing fist. Pride was a fragile shield, and it had been breaking for months. "Why me?" she asked again, softer this time. Adrian's answer came without hesitation. "Because you are the only person in this city who would rather walk out into the cold than take advantage of someone." The truth in his voice made her chest ache. She lowered her gaze, feeling the exhaustion of every sleepless night pressing down at once. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were wet but steady. "What are the exact terms?" she asked. Adrian nodded once, the tension in his shoulders loosening. "I will explain everything inside, but I want you to hear this first. You will not lose yourself in this arrangement. I will make sure of that." Marissa looked back toward the mansion, then at the empty road beyond the gates. Between two impossible choices, there was only one that could save her brother. She took a slow step forward, and the moment she did, something shifted in Adrian's expression. Not warmth, not victory, something more complicated, something that looked almost like relief. Marissa followed Adrian back into the mansion, her steps slow but certain, as if each one carried the weight of every decision she had made in the past few months. The warmth inside the house contrasted sharply with the cold wind still clinging to her coat. Chandeliers glowed overhead, casting soft light on the polished floors as they walked toward his office. This room looked different from the others. Less grand, more lived in. Papers were stacked neatly on one side of the desk, a coffee cup sat forgotten near the edge, and a single framed photograph faced the window instead of the door. The image was turned away, but Marissa recognized a woman's silhouette in it. Adrian noticed her looking. "That is not relevant to what we are discussing tonight," he said quietly. There was no harshness in his voice, just a soft boundary drawn with precision. He opened a leather binder and placed it on the table between them. "This is the contract. I need you to understand exactly what you are agreeing to." Marissa braced herself. She had been through rental agreements, insurance forms, medical documents, and everything else that came with financial struggle. But this was different. A marriage contract written in clean, careful clauses, each one carrying a consequence she did not fully understand. Adrian tapped the first page. Clause 1. We will remain married for 12 months. Divorce can be processed immediately after the term ends. She nodded. Clause 2. You will live here for the duration of the agreement. Public appearances will be required to maintain the image of a legitimate marriage. She nodded again, though her stomach tightened. Clause 3. There will be no physical expectations. There will be no intimacy required. That boundary will not be crossed. Marissa felt her breath release, slow and shaky. She had not realized how much fear she had been holding. Adrian continued. Clause 4. You will not interfere with my business decisions, and I will not interfere with your personal life before the agreement. That part felt manageable. Then he turned the page, revealing the final clause. His voice lowered, and she sensed the tension in his shoulders. Clause 5. You will agree not to speak publicly about the incident that affected my family 5 years ago. It is a matter that the board uses to undermine my position. They will attempt to use every weakness to remove me. Marissa looked up. Is that why you need a wife? To stabilize control of the company? Yes, Adrian answered. My mother's trust dictates that I must be married in order to hold 51% of the shares. Without that, the board will fracture the company. It was her way of protecting the future of her employees and her life's work. Marissa listened carefully, realizing the pressure he had been carrying. Not just business pressure, but the weight of a mother's legacy, the guilt of tragedy, and the constant scrutiny of people who did not believe in him. She touched the edge of the contract. Why is the clause about the incident necessary? Adrian paused, searching for words that did not expose more than he intended. Because the person responsible has influence. Because the truth is more dangerous than the lie. And because speaking about it has consequences that do not belong to you. His voice trembled very slightly on the last sentence. It was the first crack she had seen in his controlled exterior. Marissa straightened her back. If I sign this, it means I become part of a story that is bigger than my own. It means I carry your burden with you. Yes, Adrian said. But you will not carry it alone. I am not asking you to fight anything. I am only asking you to stand beside me. She looked down at the pages again, her heart pounding. Every line reminded her that this was not a fairy tale. It was an exchange of survival. Her brother's chance at life for 1 year of hers. Adrian's stability for her presence. Cold logic wrapped in fragile humanity. She picked up the pen. Adrian watched her closely, not moving, not breathing. But just as she lifted her hand toward the signature line, she stopped. What happens if I change my mind later? Then you will tell me, Adrian said. And I will not force you to stay. I will pay for your brother's treatment regardless. I made that promise the moment you walked back toward this house. His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed something quieter. Something like respect. Something like fear that she would walk away again. Marissa inhaled slowly and signed her name. The pen pressed firmly against the paper, sealing a decision that would change both of their lives. Adrian accepted the document without victory or relief. He simply closed the binder and said, "Thank you." And as the clock in the hallway chimed the hour, Marissa realized the reality she had stepped into. She was no longer just a woman fighting for her family. She was now part of a contract marriage that would test every part of who she was. The wedding took place 2 days later, on a gray morning that felt more like a business appointment than a celebration. Marissa stood in front of the tall mirror in one of the guest rooms, trying to steady her breathing as she adjusted the simple white dress Adrian's assistant had arranged for her. It was elegant, understated, and perfectly fitted, but it did not feel like hers. Nothing about this day felt like hers. When she stepped out into the hallway, the mansion was quiet. No music, no flowers, no guests whispering with excitement. Only the muffled steps of staff moving respectfully in the distance. This was not a love story. This was a contract being signed in front of the law. Adrian waited near the bottom of the staircase. wearing a charcoal suit that made him look even more composed than usual. He glanced up when he heard her approaching. For a brief second, his expression softened, almost as if he needed a moment to find his voice. "You look appropriate," he said finally. It was not a compliment, not exactly, but it was not cold either. It was the best he could offer inside a life built on walls. Marissa managed a small nod. "Thank you." They drove to the courthouse in silence, the kind that felt heavy but not hostile. Outside, the sky hung low with winter clouds, as if the world had dimmed its colors to match the mood inside the car. Inside the judge's chamber, everything happened quickly. A few signatures, a few formal words, a few glances from the judge, who sensed the unusual nature of the union but did not ask questions. When the judge finally said, "You are now legally married," Marissa felt the words settle on her shoulders like a weight she could not fully carry yet. Adrian extended his hand. She placed hers in his because the moment required it, and their handshake sealed what a ceremony could not. A flash went off. The photographer the board had hired took several photos to prove the authenticity of the marriage. In each picture, they stood side by side, composed and distant, like two strangers performing a role. When the camera finally lowered, Adrian stepped back slightly. "We should return. The board will expect us to attend the dinner tonight." "That fast?" Marissa asked. "There is no time to ease into this," Adrian replied. "They will look for weaknesses the moment they realize we are married. We need to appear unified." The word unified felt strange, but she nodded. Back at the mansion, a small table had been set in the dining room for what Adrian's staff called the wedding meal. It was not a celebration. It was a requirement. Marissa took her seat, feeling awkward in the silence, unsure of how to behave in the home she was now expected to live in. Adrian sat across from her, lifting his glass. "This is customary," he said. "A toast." She raised her glass too, though her hand trembled. "To your brother's recovery," Adrian said. The word surprised her. She had expected something formal, something cold and distant, but he had chosen the one thing that mattered most to her. Marissa lowered her gaze. "Thank you." They ate quietly. The room felt enormous, each clink of silverware echoing through it. But there was a moment, brief and almost invisible, when Marissa looked up and saw Adrian watching her with an expression she had not seen before. Not pity, not calculation, something else, something unsure. After dinner, he walked her to her room. The hallway stretched long and silent. He stopped at the door and handed her a key card. "This will be your space," he said. "You will have complete privacy. If you need anything, inform the staff or me directly." She accepted the card. "And your room?" "Across the hall," he said. "Separate, as the contract requires." There was a pause. Not awkward, but meaningful in a way neither of them understood yet. "Good night, Marissa," he said quietly. "Good night, Adrian." She stepped inside the room and closed the door behind her. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to breathe freely. The room was beautiful, but lonely, much like the life she had chosen to step into. Across the hall, Adrian leaned against his own door, exhaling slowly. The marriage had begun exactly as planned. Controlled, practical, bound by rules. But the moment she had looked at him across the dinner table, something had shifted. Something he had not anticipated. Something he did not know how to handle. The next morning began before sunrise. A soft gray light filtered through the tall curtains of Marissa's new room, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. She sat at the edge of the bed for a moment, listening to the silence. It was the kind of silence that belonged to houses far too large for the people living in them. She reminded herself that this arrangement was temporary. 1 year, one contract, one life-saving decision for her brother. But even with that reminder, the reality of waking up in a mansion as someone's legal wife felt overwhelming. When she stepped into the hallway, the house staff greeted her politely but cautiously, as if unsure how to treat a woman who appeared out of nowhere and suddenly became the lady of the house. She tried to smile back, but the distance between them felt impossible to bridge. Downstairs, Adrian was already waiting in the dining room. He stood near the window, reading something on his tablet, dressed in a dark suit as if he had been awake for hours. When he heard her steps, he set the tablet down. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied, unsure how formal she needed to be. He gestured toward the table. A simple breakfast spread had been prepared. Eggs, toast, fruit, and a pot of coffee that filled the room with a warm aroma that almost steadied her nerves. "We have a full day," Adrian said, taking his seat. "There are people you need to meet. There are expectations we must establish. The board dinner is tonight, and they will evaluate everything. They always do." Marissa sat down, folding her hands in her lap before reaching for her fork. "I understand. I will do my best." Adrian looked at her for a moment, studying her expression. "Your best will be enough. You handled yourself well at the courthouse yesterday." The compliment surprised her. It was the first time his tone held something gentler than obligation. She nodded, unsure of how to respond. After breakfast, Adrian led her through the house, introducing her to the staff formally. The chef, the head housekeeper, the security team. Each greeted her politely, but she could feel the hesitation behind their smiles. There were rumors already, she was sure of it. Whispers about why their employer, a man known for rejecting every social connection, had suddenly married a woman no one had ever seen before. When they reached the end of the long corridor, Adrian paused at a set of double doors. "This is the formal sitting room," he said. "There will be times when we need to host meetings here. You do not need to speak unless someone addresses you directly, and you do not need to defend me at any point." Marissa frowned slightly. "Why would I need to defend you?" He hesitated. People have opinions. They often express them without restraint. She realized he was referring to the whispers about his coldness, his inability to love, his distance from everyone around him. She had heard the same judgments before she ever met him. But now, after seeing the faint cracks in his perfectly controlled exterior, those accusations felt unfair in ways she did not expect. Later in the afternoon, Adrian's assistant arrived to help Marissa choose an outfit for the board dinner. Dresses were displayed across the bed like a small boutique, each one elegant and refined. Marissa hesitated before touching any of them. "I do not think these are for me," she said softly. "You are the CEO's wife now," the assistant reminded her. "People will look to you for confidence." Confidence. It was a word that felt expensive, like something she could not afford. Eventually, she chose a navy dress that was simple and classic, something that did not feel like a costume. When she stepped out into the foyer, Adrian was waiting. His gaze traveled over the dress, then back to her face. He did not speak right away, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, almost imperceptible. "That will work," he said. "You look appropriate." The same word as before. But this time, there was a faint warmth beneath it, something quiet but sincere. When they arrived at the restaurant, for the board dinner, flashbulbs from cameras lit up around them. Reporters shouted questions, all rapid and sharp. Marissa felt her pulse jump, but Adrian took her hand in a steady, deliberate gesture. Not romantic, not possessive, protective. He leaned in slightly. "Walk with me. Do not worry about them." She did as he asked, matching his steps as they entered the building. Inside, the board members were already seated. Wealthy, polished, and observant. Their eyes followed her every movement, dissecting her presence, her posture, her worth. Adrian pulled out her chair. It was a small gesture, but it made the room fall into a brief, stunned silence. He was not known for gentleness. He was not known for gestures like that. Throughout the dinner, Marissa spoke only when spoken to, just as he had instructed. She remained calm, composed, respectful. At one point, a board member made a pointed remark about the unexpected nature of their marriage. Adrian's jaw tightened, but Marissa simply answered with steady clarity. "Some partnerships are formed by logic, others by timing. Ours happens to be both." The room fell silent again. Adrian looked at her, not with surprise, but with something deeper. Quiet recognition. A connection that neither of them had planned for. The ride back from the board dinner was quiet, but not in the cold, distant way Marissa had expected. Instead, it carried the strange warmth of two people who had just survived something together. The city lights passed through the car windows in long reflections, gliding across Adrian's face and softening the sharp lines that usually guarded him. When they reached the mansion, the staff had already dimmed the lights for the night. The foyer glowed with a soft, amber hue. Marissa slipped off her coat, grateful for the quiet after an evening of scrutiny. "You handled yourself well," Adrian said as he set down his cufflinks. "Better than some executives who have been in boardrooms for 20 years. "I just answered honestly," she replied. "I did not want them to think you had made a reckless decision." Adrian glanced at her. "Most of them do think that." They simply have the courtesy not to say it out loud. She almost smiled. Then I am glad I did not embarrass you. You did not, he said. Not even for a moment. For a second, neither of them moved. The distance between them felt different tonight. Not smaller, but less painful. As if the contract had created an invisible line, and tonight they had somehow stepped to the same side of it without intending to. Adrian finally cleared his throat. There is something I need to show you. He led her down the hallway toward a wing she had not visited before. The lights flickered on as they walked, revealing framed photographs of the company's early years, newspaper articles, and portraits of his mother. It felt like a gallery of a life he had tried to preserve and hide at the same time. They stopped in front of a set of glass doors. Adrian entered a code, and the lock clicked open. Inside was a private office, smaller and dimmer than his main workspace. On one wall hung a large map of the city with red markers, blue strings, and notes pinned in careful lines. This looks like an investigation, Marissa said quietly. It is, he answered. This is where I analyze every financial move made by the board members. Every investor. Every person who tried to remove my mother from her position before she died. Marissa stepped closer to the map. You believe someone in your company caused the incident 5 years ago. The evidence is circumstantial, Adrian said. But there are patterns that do not make sense. Missing reports, altered signatures, transactions made under false names. She looked back at him. And the board does not know you are looking into this. They assume I stopped a long time ago, he said. They prefer the narrative that my mother's death was a tragic accident. It is convenient for them. It keeps the market calm. Marissa let the information settle. The weight behind his guardedness, the cold image he carried, the contract he had placed between them. It all made more sense now. He was fighting something larger than corporate politics. He was fighting shadows tied to grief, danger, and legacy. What does this have to do with me? She asked carefully. Adrian turned toward her. His expression was steady, but there was a vulnerability in it that was impossible to ignore. You stood beside me tonight, he said, in a way no one has in years. And the board saw that. They saw that I am not alone anymore. That matters more than you realize. Marissa felt her chest tighten, but not with fear, with recognition. She had been living her own battles in silence, and now she could see his clearly, layered under every guarded glance and restrained word. He looked back at the map. There will be more events, more scrutiny, more attempts to undermine us. I will not expect you to carry any of this, but I want you to understand why appearances matter. I understand, Marissa said softly, but you should know something too. He waited. I am not here to be decoration for your image. If I stand beside you, it is because I choose to, not because your contract tells me to. The words were simple, but they shifted something between them. Adrian's eyes softened. That is more than I deserve. Marissa shook her head. It is more than either of us expected. Silence hung in the office, but it was not heavy. It was contemplative, grounding. Adrian finally walked her back toward the main hallway. They reached the point where their rooms separated. He stopped, the dim lighting casting shadows across his features. You handled tonight with dignity and composure, he said. You earned their respect. And mine. Marissa felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from emotion, but from the sincerity of his tone. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Marissa. She entered her room, closing the door gently behind her. For the first time, the mansion did not feel entirely cold. And for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder what truth existed behind the reputation that had followed him for years. The next few days settled into a rhythm that felt unusual but steady. Marissa woke early, shared brief morning conversations with Adrian, attended small corporate gatherings when required, and tried to navigate a world that was entirely new to her. The mansion no longer felt like a museum, but it was far from feeling like home. Still, something in the air had shifted. The distance between them was no longer impenetrable. It was cautiously thinning. On the fourth evening, Adrian returned from the office later than expected. His shoulders were tense, and there was a quiet storm in his expression that Marissa had not seen before. He set down his briefcase, removed his tie with a slow, exhausted motion, and walked toward the window overlooking the courtyard. Marissa stepped into the room. Is everything all right? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the faint lights reflected on the glass, as if weighing the cost of speaking truth against the cost of silence. Finally, he said, there was a board meeting today. An unexpected one. She felt a ripple of unease. About us? No, Adrian replied. About the past. The part of my life that the contract asked you not to speak about. The room grew still. Adrian walked to the bookshelf and pulled down a slim folder. He placed it on the table between them. The single embossed name on the front made her breath catch. His mother's. Marissa moved closer. She did not open the folder, but she waited. Adrian sat down, shoulders rigid. You asked me what happened 5 years ago. I told you only pieces. It is time you understood why everything I do, every decision, every guarded expression, begins with that night. His voice was steady, but his hands were clasped too tightly. My mother, Adrian Cole, was one of the most respected female executives in the country. She built Cole Industries from a regional business into a national corporation. She was brilliant. She was fair. She trusted too easily. His jaw tightened, and she believed the board would protect her. Marissa's heart squeezed. They did not. No, Adrian said. They did not. He leaned back slightly, eyes dark with memory. 5 years ago, she received anonymous threats. Notes, calls, documents left at her office. All warnings to step down and transfer her shares. She refused. She thought it was a scare tactic. She believed in her people too deeply to suspect betrayal. Marissa listened, breath held. Then, Adrian continued softly. On the night of the annual shareholder event, her car malfunctioned. The police called it a mechanical failure. I knew it was not. I knew because the next morning, an unsigned envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a single sentence. He swallowed, as if the words tasted like metal. This is what happens to those who cling to control. Marissa felt her pulse tighten. You think someone on the board was responsible? I do not think, Adrian said. I know. I just do not have the evidence yet. The weight of his grief settled between them. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet and cutting, shaped by years of carrying a burden too heavy for one person. Marissa spoke gently. Is that why you distanced yourself from people? His silence answered for him. And why you needed a marriage to secure your position? Yes, he said. Staying unmarried meant conceding the majority of voting power. That was exactly what they were waiting for. They wanted to remove me the moment they felt I was weak. Marissa thought back to the board dinner. The veiled comments. The sharp looks. The tension that lingered behind every handshake. It was not just corporate politics. It was something darker, fueled by greed and fear. Adrian exhaled slowly. But I did not bring you here to involve you in this. I brought you because I needed someone who would not manipulate me. Someone who did not want anything from this world. Marissa stepped closer. You brought me here because you were cornered. But that does not mean you have to face this alone. He looked up at her, genuinely startled by her boldness. She continued, her voice steady and warm. I cannot fix what happened. I cannot undo the loss you carry. But I can choose to stand beside you. Not because of the contract. Because you deserve at least one person who does not see you the way they do. Adrian's composure faltered for the first time. His expression softened, almost fragile. The coldness people claimed defined him was nowhere in sight. You do not know what you are offering, he murmured. I do, she said. I am offering presence. Not partnership. Not affection. Just presence. And sometimes, that is enough. For a long moment, Adrian held her gaze with an intensity that was not sharp, but vulnerable. As if he was letting her see the truth behind every wall he had built over 5 years. He finally spoke, voice almost a whisper. Thank you, Marissa. And in that quiet, heavy moment, the distance between them shifted again, subtly, irrevocably, into something neither of them had planned, but both of them felt. The shift between them after that night was subtle but real. Adrian was still composed, still guarded, but something in the way he looked at Marissa had changed. He no longer regarded her as simply a contractual presence. He listened when she spoke. He paused when she entered a room. He allowed himself to breathe when she stood near him, as if her quiet steadiness softened something long frozen inside him. But in corporate worlds built on fear and ambition, warmth never stayed unnoticed for long. It began 3 days later, on a morning lined with gray clouds and a restless wind. Marissa was arranging a stack of mail in the foyer when she overheard 2 staff members whispering near the staircase. Their voices lowered when they saw her, but she caught enough to recognize the tone, anxious, suspicious, and fueled by something new. When she stepped into the dining room for breakfast, Adrian was already seated. His posture was straighter than usual. His jaw clenched just slightly, a sign that something had shifted. "Is something wrong?" she asked. He lifted his eyes. "There are rumors circulating through the company. Rumors about you." Marissa felt her heartbeat tighten. "What kind of rumors?" "Rumors suggesting you were paid to marry me. That this marriage is a legal arrangement created to secure my position." Adrian paused. "And that you were chosen because you could be easily controlled." The words landed like ice. Not because they were untrue. After all, their marriage was an arrangement, but because of how cruelly they were being twisted. "Who started them?" Marissa asked quietly. "Cole Weston," Adrian said. "My cousin. The one I mentioned. He has never accepted my position. He believes my mother should have left the company to him. And he knows that destabilizing our marriage is the fastest way to weaken my authority." Marissa lowered her gaze. "He does not even know me." "That is exactly why the rumors will spread quickly," Adrian replied. "People believe lies more easily when they involve strangers." The rest of breakfast passed in silence, but it was not peaceful. Something darker had entered their orbit. Later that day, Marissa accompanied Adrian to a small investor luncheon. It was supposed to be a simple, quiet gathering. Instead, whispers followed her through the room like shadows. She felt them before she heard them. "Look at her. She is half his world away. Of course this is an arrangement. No one marries Adrian Cole willingly. She must have signed something. He would never choose someone like that." Their eyes scanned her from head to toe, not with curiosity, but with judgment sharpened to a point. Marissa focused on her breathing, on keeping her posture steady. She had spent years working in places where she was underestimated. Humiliation did not break her. Survival had trained her well. But when she turned toward Adrian, she found him already watching her. His expression was unreadable to everyone else, but she recognized the tension in his shoulders, the restrained anger in his eyes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You do not have to stay." "I will stay," she said. "I will not let whispers chase me out of a room." His jaw relaxed just enough for her to know her words mattered. But the day was not done with them yet. As they prepared to leave, a photographer stepped into their path. His camera flashed too quickly to avoid. The photo he captured was not damaging, but the headline printed above it the next morning was, "The CEO and the contract bride, is this the real reason behind the sudden marriage?" Someone had leaked details to the press. Someone with access. Someone close. When Adrian read the article over breakfast, he placed the newspaper down slowly, his expression tightening until his knuckles turned white. "This is strategic," he said. "Cole Weston is escalating." Marissa felt the intensity in his voice. "What does he gain from this?" "Doubt," Adrian answered. "Doubt in me. Doubt in us. If the board believes this marriage is unstable or fabricated, they will demand an inquiry. That inquiry will delay the decisions I need to make. And delays give Cole time to influence votes." Marissa absorbed every word, the weight behind them heavier than anything she had prepared for. "What do we do?" she asked. Adrian lifted his eyes to hers. "We do what they do not expect. We remain steady. We remain united. We do not react emotionally. That is how you dismantle a strategy built on rumors." She nodded slowly, understanding the challenge in front of them. But before she could speak again, Adrian added something she did not expect. "And Marissa, none of this is your fault. Do not let their words tell you who you are." The sincerity in his tone made her chest tighten. It was the closest he had come to comfort, and maybe the closest he had come to admitting he needed her. By evening, the pressure around the house felt tangible. The staff moved more cautiously. Phone calls came in waves, and Adrian remained in his private office for hours, sorting through documents and preparing for what he knew would come next. Marissa stood in the hallway outside his office, listening to the quiet hum of stress surrounding him. She wanted to knock. She wanted to help. But she also knew he was a man who had taught himself to carry everything alone. For now, the pressure that had been building for days finally broke on a Thursday afternoon, when a single headline pushed the already spreading rumors into something sharper, something designed to wound. Insiders claim Marissa Hale manipulated her way into Cole family power. The article was filled with anonymous quotes, twisted statements, and speculation framed as truth. It portrayed Marissa as an opportunist who had targeted Adrian, and it implied that she had used her family's medical troubles as leverage to gain access to the Cole fortune. It was a fabricated story, but it spread with alarming speed. When the article reached the mansion, Adrian found Marissa in the library, staring at her phone with a stillness that felt more painful than anger. "They are saying I trapped you," she said quietly, without looking up. "They are lying," Adrian replied. "But people believe it." Her voice cracked, subtle but sharp enough to reveal the hurt beneath her composure. "They believe that I tricked you into marrying me. They believe I used my brother's illness as a bargaining chip. They believe I am—" She stopped, unable to finish. Adrian stepped forward. "Marissa, listen to me. None of that is true." She finally lifted her gaze. "It does not matter what is true. It matters what people think. And right now, they think I am someone who would destroy your reputation for my own survival." Adrian saw the fatigue in her eyes, the kind that came not from sleepless nights, but from being judged by strangers who had never spoken a word to her. It was the same exhaustion he had lived with for years, and now it was falling onto her shoulders because she had stepped into his world. "You should stay inside for the next few days," he said gently. "The press is waiting outside the gates. They will not respect boundaries." Marissa turned away, pacing slowly along the wall of books. "I cannot hide. That only makes it look worse. Remaining visible will make you a target," Adrian replied. Her hands trembled as she folded them together. "I did not ask for any of this. I never wanted attention. And now every part of my life is being dissected." Adrian felt something stir in him, an emotion he had kept buried for years. "I know what it feels like to be misrepresented," he said. "I know what it feels like to be reduced to a rumor. But you cannot let them define you." The words should have comforted her, but instead they pushed her to a breaking point. "Then why did you bring me here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You knew they would tear me apart if they had the chance. You knew they would look at me and see nothing but a weakness to exploit." Adrian froze. This was the question he had feared, the one he had tried to prepare for, but never truly answered. He took a breath. "Because I thought I could protect you." "You cannot," she whispered. "Not from this." She moved past him, heading toward the staircase. "I need space. I need to think." "Marissa," he said, stepping forward. She shook her head, tears gathering but not falling. "Please, just let me breathe." He did. He let her walk away because forcing her to stay would only hurt her more. But the distance did not fix anything. That evening, one of the mansion staff approached her while she sat in the quiet of her room. An older woman named Margaret, with kind eyes and a voice that carried decades of experience. "Mrs. Cole," Margaret said gently. "You do not need to call me that," Marissa replied. "Maybe not," Margaret said, "but I will. Because you are trying, and because this house has needed someone like you for a very long time." The kindness caught Marissa off guard. Her throat tightened. "People think I am using him." "People think many things," Margaret said. "What matters is what you are actually doing. And what you are doing is surviving. There is no shame in that." Marissa wiped her eyes. "I do not want to be another weakness for him." "You are not," Margaret said firmly. "He has been alone for 5 years. That is far more dangerous than any rumor." Later that night, Marissa stood by the window of her room, looking out at the long driveway lit by soft lanterns. The press vans were still there, cameras pointed at the gates. Their presence felt like a physical weight pressing against the walls of the mansion. She knew she could not hide forever. She knew this world would continue to test her. She knew the contract they had signed did not protect her heart from the harsh judgments of strangers. But what hurt the most was the distance between her and Adrian. A distance she had not created, but one she felt responsible for. Adrian, meanwhile, stood in his own room across the hall, palms pressed against the edge of the sink. His reflection looked tired, worn, almost human in a way he never allowed others to see. He whispered to himself, "I should not have dragged her into this." And for the first time since the contract began, he wondered if keeping her at his side was protecting her or destroying her. The following morning arrived with a sharp, unwelcome stillness. The air in the mansion felt heavier than usual, as if the building itself had absorbed the tension from the night before. Marissa barely slept. She spent most of the early hours sitting near her window, watching the press vans lined along the gates and wondering how quickly a life could be pulled apart by strangers who had never met her. By the time she stepped downstairs, Adrian was already in the dining room. He looked as though he had not slept either. His tie was slightly loosened, his hair less controlled than usual, and the untouched coffee in front of him had gone cold. He lifted his gaze when she entered, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Marissa," he said quietly, "there is something you should know." Cole Weston has submitted a formal request to the board. He is demanding an internal review of our marriage. The words felt like a blow to the center of her chest. A review? Yes, Adrian said. He claims the marriage violates ethical and corporate standards. If the board approves the review, it will open an investigation into every detail of our lives. How we met, why we married, where you lived, your financial history, my decisions within the company. Marissa felt the room tilt slightly. He wants to prove that the marriage is fake. He wants to weaken my leadership, Adrian replied. Dragging you into it is simply his most efficient tactic. She sat down slowly. What happens if the board approves the review? Adrian hesitated. It will destabilize the company. Stockholders may panic. The board may gain temporary authority. And if they gain temporary authority, they will use it to vote me out. Marissa swallowed hard. And my presence is the reason he can push for this. You are not the reason, Adrian said firmly. You are the excuse. Before she could respond, Margaret, the housekeeper, approached the table. Her expression was conflicted, as if she was carrying news she wished she did not have to deliver. Mr. Cole, she said softly, there is someone here to see you. She says it is urgent. Adrian frowned. Who is it? Margaret hesitated. It is Ruth Wilkins. From the foundation. Marissa looked up sharply. Ruth was one of the longest-standing volunteers at the Cole Family Foundation. She was respected, genuine, and deeply loyal to Adrian's mother. She would never come unannounced unless something was very wrong. Send her in, Adrian said. Moments later, Ruth entered the dining room. She carried a folder in her hands and wore an expression of concern. Adrian, she said without preamble. I came as soon as I saw the news. The rumors are spreading through the foundation. Some of the staff are worried. They do not believe them, but the damage is beginning. Adrian nodded once. I expected that. Ruth glanced at Marissa with warm, steady eyes. And you must be Marissa. I have heard only good things from the people who met you. Marissa tried to smile, but it trembled. I wish they were meeting me under different circumstances. Ruth stepped closer and placed her hand gently on Marissa's forearm. Do not let strangers define your character. Integrity speaks for itself. Marissa felt her throat tighten. The kindness was almost overwhelming. Ruth turned back to Adrian. There is something else. I believe Cole Weston is planning a public statement. He wants to pressure the board to approve his request immediately. If he does, the review will go forward within days. Adrian's jaw tensed. Of course he is. He does not care who he damages as long as he gains power. Ruth looked at him, her voice firm. Then you will have to respond. And you will have to do it now. Not from a distance. Not from behind a press release. You need to stand with your wife in front of everyone. Marissa stiffened slightly. A public appearance? Yes, Ruth said. If you remain silent, the rumors become truth in the eyes of the public. The only way to stop this is to present yourselves together. Clear, united, unshaken. Adrian exhaled slowly. That will only bring more attention to her. Ruth shook her head. Not if it is controlled. Not if the message comes from both of you. And not if people can see your sincerity. Marissa hesitated. But what if I make things worse? You will not, Ruth said gently. People can tell when someone is lying. They can also tell when someone is simply trying to live her life with dignity. Adrian turned toward Marissa, and for the first time in days, there was no coldness in his expression. Only concern. Only sincerity. This is your choice, he said. I will not ask you to stand beside me in a storm you did not create. Marissa felt her heartbeat steadied by the quiet strength in his voice. The doubts, the fear, the humiliation, none of it had vanished. But for the first time, she realized something important. She was no longer standing alone. She took a breath and met his gaze fully. If we need to face them, then we face them together. The room fell silent. Adrian nodded slowly, a hint of relief breaking through his rigid composure. Then we will prepare, he said. And we will not let Cole Weston dictate the story. Ruth stepped back, satisfied. Good. Because tomorrow morning, the two of you will speak before the foundation, the board, and the press. Marissa exhaled. Tomorrow. Yes, Ruth said. Tomorrow. The truth needs to be louder than the lies. As Ruth left the room, Adrian and Marissa remained seated across from each other, both understanding the weight of what they were about to do. They were about to step into a storm. But this time, they would do it side by side. The next morning arrived with a sense of purpose neither of them had expected. The mansion felt different, almost as if it was bracing itself alongside them. Staff moved quietly, preparing for the event Ruth had arranged, a gathering at the Cole Family Foundation where Adrian and Marissa would speak publicly for the first time as a couple. Not as a performance, not as a corporate duty, but as two people confronting a narrative that threatened to crush them. Marissa woke early, her stomach tight with nerves. She stood before the mirror, smoothing the simple blouse and blazer she had chosen. She did not want to appear extravagant or defensive. She wanted to look like herself, a woman trying to navigate a difficult moment with honesty. In the foyer, she found Adrian adjusting the button on his jacket. For once, he did not look composed. He looked human, concerned, aware of the risks. "You do not have to do this," he said as soon as he saw her. Marissa shook her head. "I already told you. We do this together." He studied her for a moment. "People can be cruel." "I know," she replied. "But running from them will not change that." Adrian seemed to absorb her words with more weight than she expected. He finally nodded and offered his arm. Not as a gesture of ownership, not as a performance, simply as support. They rode in silence to the foundation headquarters. Outside, a crowd of reporters had already gathered. Cameras flashed as soon as the car pulled up. Questions erupted from every direction, but security guided them quickly through the noise and into the building. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. Volunteers and staff, people who had known Adrian's mother, people who had seen the foundation grow from nothing, waited with uncertain expressions. They were not hostile. They were worried. They wanted to understand. Ruth stood near the podium, giving Marissa an encouraging nod. "Speak from your truth," she whispered. "Nothing else is needed." Adrian stepped up first. His voice carried the weight of leadership, but also something gentler, something that had not been heard in a long time. "There have been rumors," he began. "Rumors designed to undermine not only my position, but the integrity of someone who has done nothing wrong." He turned slightly toward Marissa. Not dramatically, not for show, just enough for people to see where he stood. "My marriage to Marissa was private. It was sudden, but it was not manipulated. It was not a transaction, and it was certainly not a scheme." Marissa felt the room lean in. Adrian continued, "My mother believed in transparency, dignity, and truth. And I will honor those values by refusing to let lies dictate the story." He stepped back. It was Marissa's turn. Her heart pounded, but she walked to the podium with steady steps. She looked out at the faces in front of her, people curious, skeptical, hopeful. She did not try to impress them. She just spoke. "I did not come from wealth," she said. "I did not come from this world. When I married Adrian, I entered a life I never expected and never asked for. And yes, there are parts of our story that are complicated. But there is one thing I can say with absolute honesty." She glanced at Adrian. His eyes met hers, steady and grounding. "I have never lied to him. I have never used him. And I did not step into this marriage to gain anything. I stepped into it because life gave me a choice between letting my family suffer or accepting help. That does not make me manipulative. That makes me human." The room fell silent. She continued, voice clear. "People who do not know me have judged me. People who have never spoken to me have questioned my integrity. But those voices do not define who I am, and they do not define our marriage." A murmur spread through the room. It was not doubt. It was understanding. Ruth stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on Marissa's shoulder. "That is enough," she whispered. Adrian returned to her side. And for the first time since the rumors began, Marissa did not feel small. She felt seen. Reporters began to shout questions again as staff escorted them out, but the tone had changed. There was less hostility, less certainty in the lies, more curiosity about the truth. As they reached the car, Adrian opened the door for her, then paused. "You were remarkable," he said. Marissa shook her head. "I just told the truth." "Sometimes," Adrian replied. "That is the most powerful thing a person can do." They entered the car together, not as strangers bound by a contract, but as two people who had faced a storm and had not allowed it to break them. The drive back to the mansion felt different from every tense ride before it. The storm of rumors had not vanished, but something had shifted, something subtle yet powerful. Marissa and Adrian had stood in front of the world together, not as a perfect couple, but as two human beings refusing to be defined by lies. The weight that had been pressing on both of them for days seemed lighter now, replaced by a quiet clarity neither had expected. When they stepped inside the house, the staff greeted them with cautious smiles. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect. Ruth's appearance at the event had carried enormous weight, and her presence beside them had helped reshape the narrative. Marissa removed her coat and set it on the entry table. Adrian paused near the staircase, loosening his tie, his expression more relaxed than she had seen in weeks. "You handled the foundation event with more grace than many seasoned public figures," he said. She smiled softly. "I was terrified." "I know," Adrian replied. "But you spoke honestly. People heard that." Marissa nodded, feeling a gentle warmth settle in her chest. "Thank you for standing beside me." Adrian's gaze lingered longer than before. "There was never a moment when I considered doing anything else." The sincerity in his voice landed with quiet force. Not dramatic, not rehearsed, simply real. As they walked toward the living room, a familiar item on the mantel caught Marissa's eye, a small glass case holding a silver key. She had seen it before, but never asked about it. Tonight, something compelled her to pause. Adrian noticed. "That key belonged to my mother. It was the first thing she ever purchased when she founded the company. A symbolic gesture." He stepped beside her. "It represents the idea that doors exist to be opened, not feared." Marissa absorbed the meaning, then looked at him. "You have been carrying a lot for a long time." "More than I realized," Adrian said, "until someone else began sharing the weight." His words hung in the air, gentle but undeniable. Later that evening, Adrian asked her to join him in his private study. Not the investigative room with maps and documents, but the smaller study filled with warm lighting, books with worn edges, and a vintage record player softly humming in the background. "I need to show you something," he said, walking toward his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Marissa froze for a moment, unsure of what she was about to see. Adrian opened the box slowly. Inside was a ring, delicate, understated, with a modest stone set in a simple band. It was nothing like the extravagant jewelry the wealthy usually displayed. It was intentional, personal, human. "This is the ring I wanted to give you the night we signed the contract," he said. "But I decided against it because it felt dishonest to offer symbolism when we did not have anything real yet." Marissa's breath caught softly. "I know what our marriage started as," Adrian continued. "A contract, a necessity, a way to survive different battles. But after what happened today," he paused, searching for words that aligned with the truth he was finally willing to say. "I want to redefine what this marriage stands for." Marissa felt her heartbeat in her throat. "Adrian." He closed the box gently and handed it to her. "This is not a proposal. This is an invitation. When you are ready, if you ever feel ready, you can replace the contract band with this one. Not because the world expects it, not because the board requires it, but because you choose it." The gesture was quiet, but its meaning ran deep. Marissa held the box carefully. She felt the weight of everything they had endured, the rumors, the doubt, the silent nights separated by tension. She also felt the shift in the air, the slow blooming of trust, sincerity, and something else she no longer denied. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "So are you," Adrian replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Marissa looked up, surprised by the gentle honesty in his tone. For the first time, she saw him not as a CEO fighting shadows, but as a man trying to rebuild something he never thought he would have again. She closed the box and held it close to her chest. "I do not know if I am ready yet." "I know," Adrian said. "That is why I am giving it to you without expectation." She nodded slowly. "But I do know this. Today, when we stood in front of everyone, I did not feel alone. I felt steady, and that came from standing beside you." Adrian took a slow breath, moved by her words. "Then that is enough." The room fell into a warm silence, the kind that did not need filling. Marissa placed the velvet box on the desk, not to reject it, but to acknowledge it. A promise waiting for its own time. "Adrian," she said softly, "thank you for trusting me." He met her eyes, something unspoken passing between them. And for the first time since the contract began, they stood not as two strangers bound by necessity, but as two lives beginning to intertwine with purpose. The following weeks unfolded with a calm neither of them had dared to imagine. The rumors quieted. The board withdrew its request for an investigation. And for the first time in years, the foundation staff spoke Adrian's name with the same respect they once gave his mother. But the biggest shift happened inside the mansion itself. Not in grand gestures, not in dramatic confessions, but in the quiet moments that revealed who they had become to each other. One evening, near the start of spring, Marissa stepped into the courtyard garden. Soft lights glowed along the stone pathway, and the first hints of new blossoms moved gently in the cool air. Adrian stood near the center fountain, hands in his pockets, watching the water ripple as if measuring the distance between his past and his future. He turned when he sensed her presence. "I was looking for you." Marissa joined him, feeling the warmth of something unspoken settling between them. "It has been a long day." "It has," he replied, "but a good one." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the soft splash of the fountain. The world had tried to break them, yet here they were, standing together, grounded and steady. Marissa opened her hand, revealing the velvet ring box he had given her. She had carried it every day since, not as a symbol of pressure, but as a reminder of a decision waiting for its own natural time. Adrian watched her carefully, without expectation, without fear. She spoke softly. "When you gave this to me, you told me there were no demands, no timeline, no pressure, and you meant it." "I did," he said. Marissa stepped closer. "Today, I realized something. Our marriage may have begun as a contract, but everything that came after, every challenge, every moment of truth, none of that was written on paper." Adrian's breath caught, almost imperceptibly. She opened the box. Inside, the ring shone under the courtyard lights, simple and sincere, like everything they had built together. "I am choosing this," Marissa said. "Not because I have to, not because anyone is watching. I am choosing it because I believe in who we are becoming." For the first time since they met, Adrian's composure broke in a way that was quiet, honest, and deeply human. His voice softened to a whisper. "Marissa, are you certain?" "Yes," she said. "This is the one choice in my life I am making entirely for myself." He took the ring from the box with steady hands and slid it onto her finger, not as part of a contract, not as a performance for a crowd, but as a vow made in the stillness of a courtyard where truth finally had room to breathe. When their hands fell together, Adrian exhaled a breath that sounded like relief, gratitude, and something very close to hope. Marissa looked up at him, her smile quiet but strong. "We opened the door," she said. "Now we walk through it." Adrian nodded, his voice barely audible. "Together." And in that moment, simple, sincere, and absent of any audience, the coldest man in the city and the woman who was never meant to be in his world stepped into a future that did not belong to contracts or expectations, but to them. A beginning written not by circumstance, but by choice.